Welcome everyone. The topic for the day is understanding chemical hazards and its safety. So, whatever chemical hazards are present in our work areas, in our workplace, we'll discuss about them. We'll also talk about the precautionary steps that needs to be taken to avert such kind of hazard. What exactly is hazardous chemical that needs to be understood? First and the foremost thing that needs to be coming in your mind is a material that has physical and chemical characteristics which might be detrimental to the health of the human beings, which affects the health of the human beings in a negative fashion. So that is what is a chemical hazard is all about it. So what are we talking about? We are talking about injuries, we are talking about damage to the properties, probably to the environment, or a combination of these is known as hazardous chemical. Again, repeating it again, physical or chemical characteristic which potentially causes detrimental effect on human health and human wealth is what a hazardous chemical is supposedly to be known as. This particular pick will give it to you. What are the common days chemical thing that we usually do about it? There are all cleaning agents. Believe me or not, all cleaning agents are having some kind of negative impact on the human health. Definitely yes. And again, and let me reiterate the one very common fact is 90% of the things that we consume or we utilize on a daily life has some or other form of chemical properties into it. The pen which you with which you write definitely is chemical. The furniture on which you have been sitting is again chemically treated, one probably adhesive being utilized, are been chemical properties, yes. Even the clothes you are wearing right now, believe me or not, they are being chemically treated so that it comes around it. So chemical is all around us, and the hazard thereof cannot be negated. So we will talk about the industrial chemicals that comes around it, the agricultural pesticide, herbicide. Everything is poisonous. Believe me or not, the cleaning material, the pharmaceutical products, all comprises of chemical things. So please, I have devoted these two particular slides to sensitize to you as to the ever-present chemical bodies, chemical compositions within the vicinity of our existence that is there. So, the hazard, chemical hazard, the undesired effect which causes the absorption of hazardous chemical into the human body are chemical hazard. Please understand, undesirous, not desired, not wanted, not required, but inadvertently your body consumes them through touch, through your skin. When I say touch, it is with your skin absorption. When you inhale, it is through your nose, it comes around it. Or when you ingest, when you actually consume something from your mouth, probably that which is detrimental towards your health. Remember, the hazardous chemical alone in concentration or when mixed with other chemical substances can causes injuries, can causes disease, or for that matter, so types of chemical hazard, one is physical hazard and the other one is health hazard. So physical hazard which is detrimental and which can be shown around it. Probably blisters on your skin will be there. You might be rendered deaf. You might be rendered speech impaired. You might be rendered visually impaired and things like that. So physical hazard and we talk about it. Let us understand those physical hazards. First and foremost thing is a flammable gas. Absolutely yes, flammable aerosol, oxidizing of gases, which basically leads to a bursting of flames. Gases under pressure, be it of oxygen, be it of petroleum, be it carbon dioxide, whatever you want to call it. The flammable liquids that comes around it, definitely yes, which causes fire. The flammable solids are there, a prominent being your paper, your wood, self-reactive substances and mixtures. Pyrophoric liquid, a liquid which is very friendly with the fire. This in combination with oxidizing liquid, oxidizing solid, peroxides, whatever to be done with oxygen, corrosive to material, where material actually when exposed to air might deteriorate. Combustible dust, pyrophoric gases and contact with water. So basically what I've been trying to tell it to you is the physical hazard. What happens is when you have a fuel, when you have heat, and when you have oxygen, if you have these two all together, remember these three combination will form absolute catastrophic. The combustible material in terms of fuel, the temperature, high temperature in terms of heat, and the oxygen will lead to some form of accident which is not in the first place. So this was all about physical health hazard. Now let us understand the health hazard. I have already said about the skin corrosion, skin irritation, acute toxicity that comes around it. It might be you might be having a stomach upset, you might have serious eye issues or eye damages, respiratory or the skin sensitization, the germ cell mutagenicity, which is basically the virus that comes and attacks your immune system. Then we have the carcinogenicity, where it is cancerous in nature, cancerous in origin. Reproductive toxicity, people are not being able to reproduce or have offspring altogether because of the modern day lifestyle, or precisely because they have been exposed to certain chemicals. So many targeted organ of your body can become renderless or can reduce the productivity or proficiency about there. Why? Because even with a single exposures, remember a radiation might render one of the organ completely useless altogether. Specific target organ or toxicity, which is with a repeated exposure that comes around it. So there are dangers of single dose exposure, single once in a blue moon, or a repeated, which is part of your work life altogether. The aspirations effect, obviously, yes, and the biohazardous infectious material, which might actually be causing internal organ damages altogether. These are the health hazard that needs to be taken into consideration. So we have spoken about the physical hazard, and we have health hazard. Let me show certain pictograph of your physical hazard, which comes around with a flammable liquid. This is the warning signs, the cancerous hazard. These are pictographical warning signs that sensitizes the workers about the presence of hazardous material within the vicinity of the organization. So remember this. This is of prime importance. Now let us understand the types of chemical hazard that comes around it. So naturally occurring chemicals is what we are talking around is microtoxin, alkalides, pyrrolizidine. Now, these are naturally occurring chemical which are detrimental altogether. And then we had our added chemicals artificially added. For example, all sulfiting agents, all nitrating agents, which we do often to stabilize certain chemicals for the consumption of the body, where it might be beneficial for the body, but a long term usage might actually make you a little bit nauseating and eventual detrimental or the ill effect of the health takes place. So unintentional and incidentally added chemicals are pesticide, lead, arsenic. Now lead is present in waters, and many a times the groundwaters can be a good sources of lead. Lead, remember, are not consumed, are basically a very toxic to the human skin, human body altogether, and you tend to lose your health over a period of a lead exposure. Arsenic is all about poisoning, it's all about slow poisoning. Mercury, we all know, is not good for our health. Now these are incidental thing that comes around with it, because people might be in the vicinity of certain mining areas, certain groundwater which has been contaminated, and so on and so forth. So please understand, there are certain things which are intentionally added, there are certain chemical which is unintentionally not desired at all, and there are certain chemicals which are always present in the atmosphere, which again is detrimental to our. So remember WHMIS, you may Google this term. It's a workplace hazardous material information system. It's a standard system that needs to be followed, maintained everywhere. Again, workplace hazardous material information system, WHMIS. What does it tells me? It tells me what exactly needs to be done in terms of preventing health hazards, in terms of reducing or making accident almost nil. So this is what we need to go around it. Workplace hazardous material information system. I am trying to give it to you the classifications and the symbols of hazard in terms of class A, B, C fires that comes around it. Let's say compressed gas, flammable and combustible liquid, and the oxidizing material. Remember the triangle that I draw in the previous slide that gone around it. Then we have the class D fires, which goes about the material causing serious toxicity effect, causing other toxicity effect and biohazardous material. Class E and F is of corrosive material and dangerously reactive material. And these are the pictograph. Now, please remember, these pictograph needs to be present everywhere and as per the standard of WHMIS, Workplace Hazard Material Information System. Now, these are the classification that comes around it. The moment you should see this thing, you should know that there is a virus, there is a bacteria, or there is an animal probably which has been infected and is not desired to be coming in contact with the human being because it is biohazardous material. Needs to understand about the toxicity of the material and the corrosivity of altogether. The effect of certain chemicals, often what happens is it depends on several other factors also. Number one is the physical properties of the substances that comes around it. Please understand, cyanide, it's basically nothing but CH4, right? So if you look into it, it's a very huge poisonous thing. A dosage, a smallest of all doses, a minutest of all doses might render the human being lose its life. So please understand the physical property. The route of entry needs to be understood. The work practices that we work around it, the nature of the exposure, is it a repetitive exposure that we goes around it because it might be part of your job profile, the combined exposures which comes around it. So you might be exposed to one particular arena out in one particular environment, and then probably you go to a different place, different work arena, and you get a different kind of exposure. Now a combination of these two, absolutely these two exposures might absolutely be detrimental to you altogether. That needs to be understood. The susceptibility of the workers, it is all about the immunity of the worker, the immune system, whether he or she is well built, got a robust immune system. And last but not the least would be your toxicity, the degree of the toxicity that the chemical might be processed. It is not even the immune system, even if you have a stronger immune system, but the chemical toxicity is very high, absolutely in a dangerous level. Probably you cannot do much of a thing. So the effect of chemical is lack of oxygen. What does it happen in? It leads to allergies, did I say so? Systematic poisoning, cancers, damage to the unborn fetus. Now these are the child which is yet to born. So probably what happens is that there might be complication in the birth. Well and good, probably this can be helped to a certain extent. But what happen if the fetus is abnormal in nature? Probably there are certain number of limbs which are be coming up, there are certain of the organs that is not being properly developed. So there are damages because of the exposures of the chemical that comes in place. Please understand this in effect affects the future generations, people, species that would be, or should I say generation that will be leading the earth, our planet, in some time, a few centuries from now, will have certain other effect that might be absolutely not acceptable as of today. And people would be deformed maybe. And then pneumoconitis is the dusty lung concept that comes around it. It is all about a lot of particle that grows on your lungs. It might get become completely dark. Lungs are essentially a white organ that comes around it. It is your, the oxygen gets consumed in the lungs. Believe me, the lungs can get darker, can getting shadier, can get have kind of viruses and so on and so forth, and can be infested altogether. So this is what I'm trying to tell you about the effects of chemicals. This is what we are talking about, the tarness that the body can consume and which is not at all desired. So controlling chemical hazard in the workplace, how do we go around it? First and the foremost thing, please, wherever possible, eliminate the use of hazardous chemical. If it is impossible to eliminate the hazardous chemical, reduce the usage or the dosage. Please do this thing. Next would be to have, if still you are having it, have a adequate ventilation system. Now ventilation system will take care that the poisonous gas is being released into the atmosphere, the poisonous and it gets mitigated in the atmosphere altogether. The concentration of airborne chemical reduces drastically. Next is what we are talking about, a good personal hygiene system. Take the help of your PPE, personal protective equipment. In fact, every time you utilize these chemicals, please utilize, be very covered with all your PPE, personal protective equipment. After the equipment, you should always have washing your hands, if possible, taking a bath, maintain regular cleaning routines. Even if you think you have not done any hazardous materials, handled any of the things, but been in the vicinity, please follow the good hygiene routine on a regular fashion and learn how to avoid carrying hazardous substances home. Absolutely, please, the pathogen, the chemical, the unwanted materials, be it dust, be it chemical, how not to take it and spread it and the other places, other workplaces. In this cases might be your work home that we are talking around it. So please get yourself very thoroughly clean and remove any particle then and so introduce administrative control. Number one, basically to expose to the minimize the exposure of the chemicals. That is probably work, rotate, and get yourself clean. This might be a process that comes around it. So have an administrative control in place. Perform maintenance work. Ensure that the work which has been done in by the chemicals or the areas where the chemical has been handled or the equipments, they should be maintained on a regular fashion. In case of this area needs to be cleaned twice thrice, and I'm speaking about even for the matter where you are actually cooking food, it should be cleaned twice a day. So that is what we are looking into it. So why? Because this toxic substances, if any will present, will be removed from that work areas altogether. I have always stressed upon the utilizations of personal protective equipment and the devices thereof. So maintain the equipment in a good order. Yes, maintenance of equipment is a must to prevent any sort of leakages, any sort of breakdown that might be eventually be detrimental to the health of human beings. So let us come to the general tips. Probably know how to protect yourself from health hazard, the chemical that you use. Read the warning labels of any chemicals before you use it. Remember that an unlabeled chemical is a dangerous one, and you should not venture into unlabeled chemicals. Open any of the tins, any of the boxes, any of the material. Get it, get it certified, get it notified to the supervisor, and bring it out. Do not, I again remember, do not make an experiment of smelling or sniffing or probably utilizing or testing that chemical for any sort of matter. What did I say? Please get in touch with the supervisor, verify what exactly is it before venturing into the usage. Always follow the directions and the precautions mentioned on the label. It's a must thing. That is the reason why labels have been put in the first place. Do not undermine the usage of the label. Please, the first thing and the foremost thing you need to see about the label is what are the hazardous material and the expiry dates and how to handle it. These are the things that comes to be is very important. Always dispose chemical properly and responsibly, and so that it doesn't get leaked into the society or none of your co-workers get affected. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video.